We like to think of history as a straight line, a steady, unbroken climb from so-called primitive beginnings to our modern, sophisticated world. We picture our ancestors as simple cave dwellers, living lives that were nasty, brutish, and short. But what if that whole story is wrong? What if, buried deep in our past, there are secrets that challenge everything we think we know? What if our ancestors had a medical knowledge so advanced it sounds almost impossible? A knowledge that was then lost to time, a forbidden chapter in the human story. In a remote cave in Borneo, archaeologists stumbled upon a 31,000-year-old secret. It was a skeleton, but this was no ordinary burial. The skeleton's left foot was gone, and where it should have been, the bone told an unbelievable story. It had been cleanly amputated, but here's the most shocking part. The bone showed clear signs of healing. This proved something that should have been impossible. The patient lived, not for days or weeks, but 4 years after the surgery. This is the story of the Ice Age surgeons and a lost world of prehistoric medicine that is forcing us to question everything about our ancient past. In 2020, a team of Australian and Indonesian archaeologists were excavating a massive, cathedral-like limestone cave in East Kalimantan, Borneo, called the Amputation. They were looking for ancient rock art, but instead, they found a grave. Inside lay the remains of a young person who had the lower third of their left leg surgically removed, likely as a child. At first, it could have been anything a rock fall, an accident, or an animal attack. But the closer they looked, the more astonishing the story became. The bones didn't have the telltale fracture marks of a traumatic injury. Instead, the cut was clean, almost surgical. Bone analysis revealed something even more profound. The severed ends showed distinct signs of healing. There were bony growths covering the cut, a clear sign the body's healing process had been at work for a long time. Scientists analyzing the remains concluded this individual didn't just survive the amputation, they lived for another 6 to 9 years. This single discovery, published in the journal Nature, pushed back the known history of surgery by an incredible 24,000 years. Before this, the oldest known example was a 7,000-year-old farmer from France. The Borneo skeleton was 4 times older. This immediately opened up a flood of questions. Who could perform a procedure like this 31,000 years ago? An amputation isn't simple. It demands a deep understanding of anatomy, muscles, blood vessels, and nerves. The surgeon would need to control catastrophic bleeding, something that's still a challenge today. Cutting the main artery in the leg without managing it would lead to death in minutes. These Ice Age surgeons must have known how to stop blood loss, maybe using tourniquets or cauterization. And the tools? This was the Stone Age. They didn't have steel scalpels. They would have used razor-sharp blades crafted from flint or obsidian. The clean, angled cut on the bone suggests a confident and skilled hand. This wasn't a desperate hack job. It was a calculated, precise operation. It implies a sophisticated body of medical knowledge existed tens of thousands of years before we thought possible, passed down not by writing, but from one generation of healers to the next. The patient's survival is almost more incredible than the surgery itself. An operation this big is just the first step. The real fight is against infection, and the hospital here was a prehistoric cave, a damp, dark place teeming with bacteria. In a world without antibiotics, any open wound could be a death sentence. Yet, the skeleton shows no evidence of a severe infection. The bone healed cleanly. This is a staggering revelation. It strongly suggests these ancient people understood antiseptic care. Researchers speculate they used their environment as a natural pharmacy. Borneo's rainforest is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, full of plants with powerful medicinal properties. It's highly likely these ancient surgeons knew which plants could fight infection, cleaning and dressing the wound with botanical remedies. This level of post-operative care also tells us a lot about their society. The young amputee would have been completely dependent on their community for months, maybe even years. They needed to be fed, kept clean, and protected. This wasn't a brutal survival of the fittest society. This was a community with a deep capacity for compassion, investing huge resources into caring for one of their own. A sign of a complex and caring social structure. The individual lived as an amputee in rugged, mountainous terrain for years, a life made possible by their surgeons' skill and their community's dedication. But we have to remember, for every incredible success story like this, there were likely countless failures. Life in prehistory was harsh. The average life expectancy at birth was low, often around 33 years, largely because of high infant mortality. If you made it through childhood, you could certainly live into your 50s or beyond. But trauma and infection were always major threats. The successes were probably, and rare exceptions, whispers of a hidden knowledge practiced in the shadows, while the failures were buried and forgotten. The Borneo amputation isn't an isolated case. It's just most dramatic proof in a growing body of evidence that paints a new picture of our ancestors as surprisingly sophisticated healers, maybe the most widespread and unsettling. The form of prehistoric surgery is trepanation, the act of drilling, cutting, or scraping a hole into the human skull. Evidence for this goes back thousands of years and has been found all over the world. In one Neolithic burial site in France from 6500 BC, a shocking 40 out of 120 skulls had trepanation holes. In some communities, this was shockingly common. Why on earth would they do this? Researchers think it was for both medical and ritual reasons. It might have been used to treat head injuries, relieving pressure on the brain. It could have also been for conditions you can't see, like chronic headaches, epilepsy, or mental disorders, perhaps believed to be caused by evil spirits that needed a way to escape. And what's truly mind-boggling is that many people survived. Just like the Borneo skeleton, archaeologists can see signs of bone regrowth around the hole, meaning the person lived 4 years after the operation. The tools were simple, a sharp piece of flint used to slowly scrape away the bone. The procedure would have been excruciating, yet they did it with a surprising success rate. And the knowledge may not have been limited to bones. There's some evidence of a kind of primitive dentistry, too. In Italy, a 14,000-year-old skeleton, the Villa Bruno one, specimen, has a tooth with a cavity that shows signs of being intentionally scraped and cleaned with tiny flint tools. This suggests that our ancestors were experimenting with treating tooth decay long before we thought. This was a world where medicine, magic, and ritual were all tangled together. Early healers were probably also they saw animals eat certain plants when sick and experimented with those same herbs. In the Shanada cave in Modanda, Iraq, a Neanderthal burial from 60,000 years ago was found with clumps of pollen from medicinal plants. For years, this was hailed as the famous flower burial. While that specific interpretation is now debated, the pollen may have been brought in by bees, the presence of other individuals. In the cave with healed, debilitating injuries still points to a culture of compassion and care. But this knowledge was a double-edged sword. For every successful brain surgery, Homie ended in death from infection or brain damage. This was a gritty, terrifying world of trial and error medicine. For thousands of years, this mixed out of practical skill and magical belief defined medicine. Then, things slowly started to change. In ancient Egypt, around 1600 BCE, a new way of thinking emerged, captured in a document called the Edwin Smith Papyrus. This text is revolutionary. It's essentially an ancient medical textbook for trauma surgery. It details 48 cases, from skull fractures to spinal injuries, all laid out systematically. Title: Examination, Diagnosis, and Treatment. What's amazing is its rationality. There are no magic spells. Instead, there are precise Clinical observations. The author noted a brain injury on one side of the head could cause paralysis on the opposite side of the body. He described how a crushed vertebra could lead to a loss of feeling below the injury. This is the beginning of clinical neuroscience, recorded a full 1,000 years before the Greek physician the father of medicine was even born. Other cultures were making their own leaps. In India, around 600 BCE, a surgeon named Sushruta wrote the Sushruta Samhita, a massive text describing over 120 surgical instruments and 300 procedures. He famously perfected a method of rhinoplasty nose reconstruction, using a flap of skin from the forehead. His techniques were so advanced they eventually made their way to Europe, forming the basis of modern plastic surgery. The Greeks and Romans would later formalize the move away from the supernatural, arguing diseases had natural causes and building public health systems. But as medicine became more systematic, it also became more regulated, sometimes brutally. The Babylonian Code of Hammurabi, from around 1750 BC, laid out strict laws for physicians. If a surgeon performed a major operation and the patient died, or operated on an eye and the patient went blind, the surgeon's hands were to be cut off. Imagine the terror. A single mistake could cost a doctor their livelihood. This would have had a chilling effect, stifling the bold experimentation of the Ice Age under a cloud of fear. The story of medicine isn't a simple march of progress. It's a tangled tale of genius and ignorance, compassion and brutality. The discovery in Liang Thibault Cave has fundamentally changed how we see our deep past. It's a core part of the human story, stretching back at least 31,000 years. These Ice Age surgeons, with their stone tools and botanical knowledge, were pioneers. They worked without knowing about germs, without modern anesthesia, without the vast library of science we have today. And yet, they performed miracles. They showed that our ancestors were not the simple figures of our imagination. They were innovative, intelligent, and compassionate people. This forbidden art flickered in and out of history. It was advanced by Egyptians and Indians, preserved through the Islamic Golden Age, and rediscovered in the modern era. The skeleton from Borneo is a silent testament to that lost world, reminding us that history is full of secrets, still waiting to rewrite our story. It proves that, for as long as we have been human, we have been healers. What do you think is the most surprising part of the Ice Age surgeon's story? The skill, the post-operative care, or the compassion of the community? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this journey into our hidden past fascinating, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the mysteries of history. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. Our history is filled with forbidden secrets and forgotten worlds. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover the next dark chapter. The truth is waiting.